So, with that in mind, Anna Bundy. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I get to stand at this podium, I guess, because I gotta run my computer. And did everybody hear me okay? Excellent. Thank you again for this facility and making it available to us. I do hope that even though I'm a little further away from you than I normally am, that we can have a good conversation here. We may want to at least, Wendy, pass that mic around, or do we have another mic that we can pass around? Excellent. And I hope to go through some information here that you will find beneficial. But right off the bat, I have a question for you, and I'm really wanting you to answer it. Maybe when the mic gets here, we'll be able to hear each other a little bit more. But that question is, what is liberty? And it may seem like a very simple question, right? It seems very, very simple. But I want you to contemplate what liberty is, what it really is, because I didn't truly think about it in detail until I was sitting in solitary confinement and had been there for almost a year. And I hadn't seen my family in a long, long time. And I was never even convicted of any crime. And never ever was. And liberty became something that became very, very precious to me, and I began to understand it. So I want your thoughts and opinion. What is liberty? Anybody want to give it a shot? Anybody? We're all friends here. At least we're all going to be friends. Right back there.
Liberty to homeschool.
Okay, liberty to homeschool. To be able to educate your children the way you choose. Okay, what else? What else? Right here.
The opposite of slavery.
Okay, the opposite of slavery. Do you have one?
Self-autonomy.
Self-autonomy. To be able to decide what you're going to do with your body. Right? Okay, what else? Right here.
Right. Freedom.
Freedom. Okay. What is freedom then?
Just what it says, it's free. You're free. Do what you want to do in the end.
Okay, free to do what you want to do.
What? Yeah.
Make your own choices. To make your own choices.
Yes.
Okay, right here and then right here.
Liberty is individual determinism, self-entrepreneurship, the ability to act for yourself, but it also comes with rights and responsibilities of us as citizens.
Okay, ability to act for yourself, but it comes with responsibility. Right here and then one more right back here.
Well, for me, personally speaking, liberty is to be grounded and rooted in the salvation of Jesus Christ. Nobody can take that away from me.
To be grounded and rooted in the salvation of Jesus Christ. Thank you very much. Right here.
Liberty is the ability to do whatever you want to do, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's right.
Okay, so he basically said the very definition of what I believe liberty is. And all of you were right. I didn't hear anybody that I would disagree with. But I believe that liberty is exactly what he said. The ability to do whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. Now, we really need to, I'm asking you to in your mind, decide if this is a true definition of liberty or not. Because if we can all kind of somewhat get on the same page, then it's going to help us in our future. It's going to help us with our country. Because in order to understand when liberty is lost, you have to understand what liberty is. And in order to understand who is taking it, you also have to understand what liberty is. And once we understand the true definition of liberty, then we can easily identify when it's being lost and who is taking it. And that's an exercise that I want you to go through right now. So does anybody, and believe me, I'm open for discussion. I'm open even for disagreement. But I do want to say, kind of right off the bat, is there anybody that has a real problem with this definition of liberty? Because the reason
There could be.
Okay, go ahead.
I consider my own family. So if someone feels like they have the right to health and don't want their health jeopardized, and I've approached them and they feel because I'm not adhering to the mandate to be vaccinated or to wear a mask, they feel, in that case, I feel the liberty to do that. In that case, they feel like I'm infringing on their right to health.
Okay. So are you defending this, or are you just saying that some other people might have a problem with this?
Well, they might consider it a right to be healthy, and if I walk into a room and they feel like that right's being violated, then my liberty is infringing on their right.
Okay, we certainly know that that is a position of a lot of people, right? Now, I think where they fault on that position is their understanding of what rights are. So, not necessarily the definition of liberty, but what rights are. And I think that's a fair discussion to have. And I do want to point out, right up front, that if you go down to your city hall, if you go down to the Capitol building, you go down to your municipalities and your county buildings, there's a whole bunch of people that do not believe that this is the definition of liberty. The ability to do whatever you want, as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. Because this makes you completely free. You can do whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's right. This makes us free. And the limits are other people's rights. And so now I want to not just say that this is the definition of liberty. I want to prove to you that our founders believed that this was the definition of liberty. And so let's start with someone like Thomas Paine, right? He's a pretty good authority. We can trust him. And listen to what he says. Liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. There he just said it, right? Liberty is the power to do everything that does not interfere with the rights of others. Thus, the exercise of the natural rights of every individual has no limits, save those that assure to other members of society the enjoyment of the same rights. Now, it's a lot more eloquent. He says it a lot nicer than what I said the definition is, but is that not saying the exact same thing? Okay, what about Thomas Jefferson? He was the author of the Declaration of Independence, probably one of the most influential founders of this nation. Let's see what he has to say about it. Rightful liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others. I do not add within the limits of the law, because law is often but the tyrant's will, and always so when it violates the rights of the individual. So is he not saying the same thing, that liberty is unobstructed action according to our will within limits drawn around us by the equal rights of others? Or in other words, liberty is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights. And so there's some authority behind it, and I could go on and on and on about what the founders believed liberty was. And this is what they believed, that it was unobstructed action according to our will with limits drawn around it by the rights of others. And so if we can accept and understand that this is the definition of liberty, then let's apply it in our lives a little bit. I think this is going to be a good exercise. So let's talk about the freedom to worship, right? Well, if we use this definition, what is the freedom to worship? The ability to worship whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights, right? Do you believe that you should have that right? Do you believe that you have that right to be able to worship whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon another person's rights? So human sacrifice is definitely not something that is freedom to worship, right? Right? But to be able to go and to think and to worship and to come to assemble or to do it at home or whatever should be your right. It is your right. Yes.
And our founders understood that to be something that came from God. It wasn't given by men, so it could not be taken away.
That's right. I'm going to touch on that just a little bit. So what about the freedom or liberty to own and control property? Well, how would that be defined? Well, the ability to do whatever you want with your property as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbor's rights, right? Or somebody else's. Are we losing that? We are, right? Many say we've lost it. The ability to do whatever you want on your property as long as you do not infringe upon your neighbor's rights. What's wrong with that? I don't see how that could be, how we could go wrong. As long as we're not infringing upon somebody else's rights, why shouldn't we be able to do whatever we want with our property? Our founders clearly believed that. And they believed very strongly in the right to own and control property. That you are a king of your own property. And we'll touch on that a little bit. So can you see right off the bat how because we've defined liberty, how we can also see very clearly how it's being taken? And then everybody in your own minds, you can tell right off the bat who is taking it. Right? We don't need to have that discussion. We all understand. We can see clearly who is taking it. And so we have to understand that our liberties are being lost. They're being lost. What about the ability to, let's go to trade. I like this one. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So to be able to trade, well, how do we apply it? The ability to trade whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. So you can't force somebody to trade with you. But as long as there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, and as long as you own what you're trading, then you should be able to do it, right? That's what our founders clearly believed that. And so, is that also being taken from us? Is that also being restricted? The freedom to trade, right? It is, right? And we can identify through this exercise who is doing it. Now, to just get into a little bit what you mentioned, here's a sentence out of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. What does unalienable mean? That's right, that they're not to be alienated. They're not to be separated from us, right? So our Creator gave us certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And we know who is the author of these words. It was Thomas Jefferson. So we know exactly what he meant when he said liberty, which is the ability to do whatever you want as long as you do not infringe upon another person's rights. And our country was based upon this belief, this understanding, and it is being taken. And it's very important that we understand that it is being taken, that for some reason, our history shows that it's always under attack. That there's always people that somehow want to say, no, you don't have liberty, you have to do what we tell you to do, and how we tell you to do it, and when we tell you to do it. You're not free. But this is the definition of freedom. This is the definition of liberty. Now, because I am here wanting your support, wanting you to be confident in voting for me, I'm going to go through a little bit of where I came from, who I am. I'm going to just skip through pretty quick, though, because I want you to know what makes me tick and kind of why I'm standing here a little bit now. I was born on the Bundy Ranch. It's in southern Nevada. It's a arid, dry place. These are my parents, Clive and Carol Bundy, and I'm grateful for them raising me and teaching me right from wrong, and when to compromise and when not to compromise. My mother's from Gooding, Idaho, so she's an Idahoan. Here's a picture of the ranch. You can see there's not a whole lot of vegetation there. And it takes about 100 acres to produce enough feed for one cow. And so you have to run cattle on a large area, which it makes it very difficult. And of course they have to have water because it's the desert. And we have these springs that are very small. And my forefathers captured these waters and put them in water troughs. And my father in his lifetime has expanded this infrastructure of water troughs all over the desert. And that's how they survive, and that's how we make a living. And it's also very good for hunting and camping and all those other things because there's all the wildlife benefit from it. Here's a picture of my dad on the horse. You can see that bull right on the horn there. It's got a little hair on it, and it probably got done just hooking the horse because they have to be tough out there. They're pretty range. My little brother, I grew up doing this. This is what I did a lot. Ran cows. This is my little sister. She's getting off the bus. She's a lot older now, but she's met with 4 dogs and a calf. And that calf, my dad actually saved that calf out of his mother got hit on the highway, and his mother was dying or right on the verge. And my dad did an emergency C-section, pulled the calf out, saved the calf, and then we started bottle feeding it, and it grew up to be a big bull. And he was a pest. He was just a nuisance because he always thought that he should be around us all the time, no matter what we were doing, even trying to go into the house. And so he became like, he'd go through fences and everything just to try to get to us because he thought, he had that was his role. And also it was very strange because he would go and lay down in the field, not very far from the house, and all the dogs would get on top of him, and then the sheep would all get on top of him. And that's how they would sleep. And we just said that they were definitely having an identity crisis. A lot like the people in Boise right now, right? So then when I was 19 years old, I actually went and served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I went to Minnesota, and I was there for 2 years. And I consider these times sacred times because this is where I really learned to love the Lord. And I did the best I could to teach people. I talked to hundreds of people about Jesus Christ, and some listened and some didn't. But this is where I got a lot of refinement because I came off the ranch, and then all of a sudden, now I'm walking around talking to people in a white shirt and a suit and tie, and I'm having to communicate, and I'm having to write, and I'm all these things, and so that was really good for me. But also, I left there dedicated that whatever I was going to do, I was going to do for the Lord, and that has been a great blessing for me, and it still is what I desire. I desire to do what the Lord wants me to do, and I always balance what I'm doing off of that. And I think it is only fair that I share that with you because it is something that truly motivates me. And I want to please the Lord. I want to do what He asks me to do. And I believe that He has a plan. And part of that plan, if we choose, is to be free. Now, after that, I went and tried to get myself a little educated. And I went to a little school, Southern Utah University. And I was there for quite a while and wondering why I was in that little town for so long. I'd started a little business and but felt like I was supposed to stay there. Didn't know why until finally I realized and found the reason why I was going there. And I met my wife, Lisa. And shortly after that, we picked up and went to Arizona and had started our life there, and I ended up having 6 children, 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest is 20 now. She's been married for a little over a year, and she's expecting. And this weekend, we're going to find out whether it's a boy or a girl. I also, when I went to Arizona, I started a business. I started it from scratch, and it was a commercial fleet maintenance business where I managed to maintain commercial trucks. I'd go in and contract with them. And I ended up building one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. And so I've hired hundreds of people. I've dealt with millions of dollars in budgets. I've had to create procedures and all of the things that, come along with a startup business. And I enjoyed it. I've dealt with a lot of people and put teams together, and we end up being, a large, quite a significant size company in Arizona. And I tell you that, why? Because I want you to understand that there's another side of me, that there's another side where I've had to deal and to be a CEO. I've had to, do a lot of working with people and administrating and all of those things that come along with that. Also, when I was in business about 16, 17 years, I could see that this industry was really lacking in technology. It just wasn't there. I don't know why it wasn't there. No one had just put it together, and we needed it. We were growing, and we couldn't grow as much as we needed to, or we couldn't provide the services like we wanted to without more technology. So I put a team together, and it took us several years, and we ended up building a software for this industry. And it worked so well in my shop that we began to sell it to other shops. And now it's one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America.
Wow.
And so that's a little bit about my business background, about my desire in entrepreneurship, and the ability to be able to take pretty extensive, detailed ideas and actually make them into something that's valuable for people to use, and to put teams together and get going all in the same direction. And I think those skills that I've learned through business for several decades will be very beneficial in the governor's office. And I, again, just want you to know about this. Now, skipping over a whole bunch of things that happened from that time, because my life was pretty good. It was really, I was doing well in business, and it was the first time in my life that I had both time and money, because usually when you have time, you have no money, and when you have money, you have no time, right? And then all of a sudden, and it was pretty much all of a sudden, even though the legal battles and so forth have been going on for a long time. But in 2014, the federal government came down upon my father's ranch. After about 140 years of ranching there, and basically said that we're going to make your ranch a mitigation area for the desert tortoise, so you can no longer ranch there. But the problem is that my family, my dad, had rights. They were established through ancestral rights. They were deeded with the state of Nevada, and the federal government just didn't want to recognize those. And so my dad was, no, you're not going to take it away. And it ended up into a confrontation, I guess, if you will. I mean, nobody was shot, nobody was killed or anything like that, but it ended up being kind of what people call a standoff. And I could give you lots of details. They were shooting the cattle from the helicopters, burying them in mass graves. They ended up killing about 60 head of cattle. They were destroying the water infrastructure that I talked about. Some of it was over 100 years old, and they're just tearing it out with backhoes. Destroying the corrals. And then anybody who would try to resist them or even demonstrate against them, they were beating them down, tasing them, sicking dogs on them. All of that was going on. And ultimately, make a very long story short, the American people saw what was going on because we had something called social media, Facebook, and these videos were going out. And hundreds of people and ultimately thousands of people came to the ranch and basically gave these federal agents an ultimatum and said, look, we're not okay with what you're doing here. and you need to leave. And because of the so much support from so many people across the country, they decided to leave. And I watched that happen, and it changed me. Both the entire experience changed me because I did not have any idea that we were in such trouble in this country. But also, I also within that same week, I saw the solution as well. Here's a picture of a bunch of cowboys and people standing and saying, "Hey, look, you're not going to do this to this family anymore." And also then just literally about an hour later, this picture is here. And if you look at this, you'll see that this is the rearview mirror of a federal vehicle. And you could see the line of vehicles behind them. And then you could see in front of it, you could see the freeway. And I just wanted to explain that this line continued and wound up all the way to the freeway. There was 107 vehicles, and they left within an hour because the American people said, "We are not okay with what you are doing." And so this changed me forever. I'll never be the same, even if I want to, because we didn't ask for this. And we didn't ask to be shoved into the media. We didn't ask to be in the limelight. We didn't ask for any of this. None of us did. But it's what came upon us, and we responded the best way we could. We believed that we were right, and we sought the Lord's direction and guidance, and He preserved us. And so this is some of the things that went on. Now, I could go into a lot more detail, but I want to spend the rest of our time here talking about Idaho. Just as a little side note, it was in 2015 when I moved to Idaho. I live in Emmett, Idaho. So I've been here for almost 8 years now. And so to some of you, like that's new to Idaho, but others it's a long time. So anyway, just letting you know, it was in 2015 that I came to Idaho, and I've been here ever since. And in some of the other things I've talked about, I talked about my journey getting here and what happened when I first got here and all that. But I want to spend the rest of the time talking about Idaho, because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And if you don't know that by now, I hope by the time we're done here, you will understand that, because we are in a fierce battle for our conservative soul here in Idaho. Now, to kind of just go through some of the challenges, Idaho is the fastest growing state in the United States, and it has been for a while. Approximately 248,000 people have moved to Idaho since 2015. So to just kind of put the challenge together, that's like adding the city the size of Boise to Idaho every 10 years. Talk about a challenge, right? I mean, imagine that's the growth rate that we're going at, and it doesn't look like it's going to slow down. We're going to continue to keep growing at that rate or close. And so that poses a lot of challenges. But to make matters worse, approximately 36% of the people coming to Idaho are liberal-minded, and they want desperately to change Idaho into a more woke, progressive place to live. And they're being very active in this, and they're very organized, and they seem to be funded. And there's many things about it. Idaho is a great place to live, right? Why not come here and then turn it into what they want? That's how they think. And then also there's other things that are driving that as well. Now, so with the Republican Party members controlling the Idaho Senate, House, and Governor's office for the last 26 years, you would think that Idaho would be the most conservative state in the country, but it's not. In fact, you have to ask the question, why the Republican Party platform is a righteous platform. It's a good platform. If you've ever gone through it, it is a good platform of small government, limited fiscal responsibility in government, limited government, illegal abortion being illegal, and many other things that protects individual rights. It's declared in there. So you have to ask, why is that not more in our laws? Why are we becoming a huge government? Why are are we our spending? Why is our spending so high? Why? And I'm going to go over a few of these things. Why are we not the most conservative state in the United States if the Republican Party has controlled the House, Senate, and Governor's office? And why are we dealing with things like this? I mean, you guys, if you go downtown Boise, it does. I mean, you can go downtown often, and actually on the flagpoles, you'll see rainbow, or the light poles, you'll see rainbow flags on city or state property. So we're actually paying to put these flags up, and yet we're a completely Republican state. We have to ask why. What's going on? Well, I want to shed a little bit of light, give you some facts here, because one fact is that Governor Little, as a senator, so this was clear back in 2000, early 2000. Did you know that he was the only state representative in Idaho to support gay marriage? The only state representative in Idaho to support gay marriage. And now, as governor, under the Governor Little's leadership, if you will, Idaho has increased its food stamps program by 24.2%. That's more than any other state in the United States. Okay, so you have to ask the question, why? What's going on with this? Why would he be doing that? He also he's dumping millions of dollars of both state and federal dollars into government-free housing. He just dumped another $50 million into government-free housing here in Idaho. And if you remember, those who remember back a little bit, Governor Little was one of those that supported Obamacare or Medicaid expansion in Idaho. And these are the things that he's doing. So why is this important for you to know? Well, if we break it down, state housing, government welfare, free food, free health care programs, and pushing the gay ideology has been the staple of the liberal agenda for decades, right? If you were to break it down, what are the liberals, what is their agenda? Well, free housing, free food, free education, free health care, and pushing the gay ideology. And no one has pushed that agenda more in Idaho than Governor Brad Little. Now, so again, there's no wonder we're in such a fatal battle for our conservative soul. Because we keep going down and voting for these people. He's not alone. He's not alone. There's many ties to this very same ideology, this very same agenda, and they're the leadership of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party. And so we have to start thinking a little different, because these people know that the majority of Idahoans, every election, just go down and vote for them because they have an R next to their name. And that's how they stay in power, and that's how they push the agenda in our state, and that's how they turn our state from a conservative state to a leftist-driven liberal state. And that's one of the things that we're trying to prevent. Now, if this was all I had to tell you, then maybe we can all quickly get on the right page, we can counter it and move forward. But Idaho is not only the fastest growing state in the United States with the most increase in welfare programs, but during Brad Little's reign, Idaho is first in a few more things as well. And I'm going to just show you a few of these things. Idaho was the first state to arrest pastors for organizing church outside. You remember that?
Yes.
During the lockdown. Watch this.
Always trust in chariots and others trust.
I want to point out, they're about ready to strip the Bible out of the pastor's hand, so they put handcuffs on them in Idaho.
Trust in horses, but we recall the Lord and God.
Now, if I can, I want to just reference, I've got a U.S. Constitution in my pocket here. I want to go to the First Amendment. And if you remember, most states would not ratify the Constitution until they added the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments. Because they were afraid that if they just created a central government and it didn't have a Declaration of Rights, that the government would just start doing what they fought against. That they would just end up in the same situation as what they fought against. And so the states required the first 10 amendments before they would ratify it. And the very first amendment, and the very first line, so it had to be the most important thing on their mind, right? The most important thing of everything that they would add, the very first sentence of the very first amendment. And it reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So right off the bat, they made it where government does not have jurisdiction, that it's off limits, that people should be able to worship freely. And that was the very first thing that they said. But yet, in Idaho, we're arresting pastors for having church outside. Now, if there was any question of whether, maybe somehow the state or the governor or somehow they have authority in the state to do it, well, I'm going to read you the Idaho State Constitution. And if you go again to the very first page of the Idaho Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, it's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberties. It says, the exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. And now, if that's not enough, which it is, it's clearly enough, right? Let's go to Section 19 of the Idaho State Constitution and read what it says. It's titled Religious Freedom Guaranteed. Now listen to these words, because these words are beautiful to me. I think that they ring to me. It says, it is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that would be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. So it's completely off limits, right? Yet we have right here in Idaho officers that are arresting pastors for organizing church services outside. And we were the first to do it. We were the first to do it. Think about that. Think about that. We think Idaho is safe, right? We think Idaho is free. But yet, one of the greatest violations that's ever happened in this country happened just a few years ago in Idaho. Now, Idaho is also the first state to arrest a mother for taking her children to the park. We just talked about that. Sarah Brady. And all the trouble that has caused her and her family. And, but yet it went on in Idaho. Idaho was also one of the first states to begin raiding businesses for not shutting down and prosecuting owners for not shutting down during COVID, during the lockdown. And we have to ask the question, why are officers acting this way in Idaho? What are they doing? Go ahead. You want to give it a shot?
They've completely forsaken their oath. And any officer that's going to enforce vaccine mandates, shutdowns, any infringement of our rights as citizens doesn't have they don't deserve to wear the flag on their shoulder.
So why are officers required to take an oath to both the U.S. and the state constitutions? Anybody know? I mean, there's many reasons, but one that I think stands above the other is that so that it can say no, and that they're supposed to say no, because clearly, this right here was a violation of both these constitutions that they took an oath to. And they took an oath to uphold and defend it against foreign and domestic enemies. That's very clear. And yet, we have officers in Idaho arresting pastors. Now, I do want to be very clear, because they were, I'm not justifying it in any way, but if you were to ask them what they were doing, they were obeying orders. They were obeying orders. And we have to say, well, whose order are you obeying? And they were obeying this man's order. That's the orders that they were obeying. And I want to show you this right here. So this is the self-isolation order that was issued on March 25th, 2020. And if you read there, it says, this order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's telling you that you have to stay in your home. I don't remember ever getting that authority. I know that I wasn't born on earth for another person to tell me that I have to reside in a building. I know that that's the opposite of freedom. Now we could go down through here. He did say there's some exceptions, and then he's directing businesses, saying some are essential, some are not. And then in number 4 here, it says, prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any number of individuals. And that included church. And so he directed, right here, if you have any questions, this is the page 9 of the stay-at-home order, page 9, section 9. It says the director requests that the sheriff and chief of police in the state of Idaho and the Idaho State Police ensure compliance with and enforce this order. So this was not an order of suggestion. This was an order of enforcement. And the officers, as I just showed you, were enforcing it, even though it's a complete violation of both the U.S. and state constitutions. Now, let's just give Governor Little a little break here, okay? Let's give him a break, and let's just say that maybe he was whatever, maybe he was confused about these or whatever, and maybe he was just overexcited about protecting the health and safety of the people of Idaho. So he was just doing it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. Can we put our minds there and just hypothetically say that maybe he was doing that? And let's ask that question. I want to give you some evidence to answer this question. Now, before I move on, what is the opposite of evidence? What's that?
Propaganda.
Yeah. Who said that? That's like the first time someone's ever said it right off the bat. Propaganda is the opposite of evidence, right? So I want you, as I go through this, I want you to decide whether I'm presenting propaganda or whether I'm presenting evidence. Okay, that's your choice. You get to decide that. All I'm going to do is show you these things, and you get to decide whether it's propaganda or whether it's evidence. Because do you remember when Governor Little put the state of Idaho in a state of emergency? It was on March 13th, 2020. Now that's an important date. Remember, March 13th, 2020, because that happened to be the same day that President Trump held a press conference and announced that he was releasing $50 billion to states that were in a state of emergency. Okay? Now, again, maybe Idaho really was in a state of emergency. Maybe there was mayhem going on and Governor Little, felt like he had to do something about it. The problem with that is on March 13, 2020, on his own website, he says that there was only one confirmed COVID case. So he put the entire state of 1.8 million people in a state of emergency because there's one confirmed COVID case, and it just so happened to be on the very same day that President Trump announced that if your state was in a state of emergency, then you could qualify for $50 billion of federal, some of $50 billion of federal relief money. So anyway, here's some evidence, more propaganda. Now, do you remember of just a few days later, about a week and a half later, he put the state of Idaho in extreme state of emergency. You You remember that? That's when he issued the lockdown order on March 25th, all of those things, extreme state of emergency. Well, it just so happened to be that on March 25th was the same day that President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal relief packages to states that were in extreme state of emergency. Okay? And at that time, we had no COVID deaths, and we had 136 unconfirmed COVID cases. Again, we're a state of 1.8 million people, a little over, and this is what he has done. Now, here's a little more evidence because he begins to tell us what he's doing. Like right here, he says, and securing millions, this is his own documentation. This is a proclamation. And he's saying, and securing millions of dollars of federal funds. Then he goes on and talks about President Trump releasing money. And then if you look at the bottom here, it says section 46601. And that is the authority that he's saying he can use to do what he is doing. So remember that number, section 46601, Idaho Code 46601. Right here, he's thanking President Trump for $1.25 billion. And he's again talking about the finances of Idaho. And then this is a really interesting one. This is Executive Order 2020-07. And he says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020, declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25, 2020, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho. Then he goes on, whereas Congress has passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19. Whereas I anticipate additional congressional actions on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. So it's all about money, right? We've got money, they're going to give us more money. So therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor. So he's putting a committee together, right? And because all these funds are coming from the federal government, and he's putting a committee together that he appoints and that they serve at his pleasure. And then they get to decide among themselves, and literally it's just a handful of people that he appoints and that serve at his pleasure, and they get to decide where all these funds go. Okay? And then the last page of the same order, he says, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. Now, how are the funds of the state supposed to be administered? Who's supposed to administer the funds of the state? Yeah, the legislature, right? The legislature. How many people are in the legislature? Anybody know? There's 105. And why is it really important that the legislature administers the funds and not the office of the governor, not the governor and a few of his buddies? Anybody have an idea why it's so important that the legislature does it? Right? They actually represent the people, right? They're closer to the people. They're supposed to be the people. They're one of us, right? Did you want to?
I was pretty much going to say the same thing, and they're representing all the different parts of the state, the entire state, the urban, the rural.
That's right, and so the representatives of us, they're supposed to be us. We send them to the Capitol, and they all out in the open get to argue about it and debate it, and they all decide together where this money is going to go, right? And it's all out in the open, it's all documented, and it's to make sure that a small group of people don't get to decide where all the funds of the state are spent, so that it's not abused, so it's not wasted, so it's not stolen, so it's not used to keep people in power. So it's not abused in those ways. That's why. But we can see right here that Governor Little bypassed the legislature, and literally just him and a couple of his buddies, a few of his buddies, get to now administrate all these funds. Now, maybe we're not talking about a lot of money, Anybody have any idea how much the governor's office received in federal funds over the COVID issues? Anybody? What's that?
1.25 billion.
No, that was just the first installment. He received $18.7 billion. $18.7 billion. That's over 2 times the annual state budget, by the way. Just kind of give you an idea of how much money. And literally a handful of his buddies and him get to decide what they're going to do with it, and they've done that. Now, do you remember that the authority that I mentioned that he's saying he's acting under? The 46601? Well, let's go to this. I want to show you this. So it's titled 46, Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601, Authority of the Governor. So what did Governor Little put the people of Idaho under? Martial law. And I'm not telling you this as a hyperbole. I'm not trying to excite you. I'm just saying the facts are he put us under martial law. And he kept us under martial law for over 740 days. Now, let's go down to section 2, because I think this is very important for you to realize. It says, during a period of state of emergency, extreme emergency. Remember, he created the extreme emergency. Normally, an extreme emergency is something that comes on the people. And because it's an extreme emergency, the governor has to act, right? But he actually declared it and made the emergency himself. It says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise all police power vested in the state. So I'm going to say it again. I'm going to read it again. During a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the state all policing power vested in the state. What do we call that? Yeah? In fact, did you know that our founders defined tyranny as all 3 branches of government held under one body? So yes, this is the very definition of tyranny. But what else do we call it? What form of government is this? This is a dictatorship, right? This is a dictatorship. And he held us under these powers for, again, over 740 days. And now he has all this money, right, that he's put all in himself, bypassed the legislature, so he's fully funded, and now he's taken all the powers of the government under his wing, under his control. And what did he do with it? He enlarged the bureaucracies of the state of Idaho. And he also ordered police to arrest pastors, mothers, and hundreds of other people in Idaho were arrested or cited for many different things because they did not comply to his orders. Thousands of businesses were declared non-essential and never to reopen their businesses again. Many recovered or are recovering, but this was what he did with his power. He even suspended parental rights, where if the state takes custody of your children, that several rights, including the right to visit them, were suspended under these powers. Now, remember, we're trying to answer the question of whether he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. So I want to go to his own words, his own statements, because he released a press release on March 8, 2020. So this year, so not too long ago. And this is what he said. He says, the emergency declaration, so that's the emergency powers, all the things that he did. The emergency declaration served as an administrative function to recoup FEMA dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. So he's telling us right here very clearly that the reason why he put the state of Idaho under extreme state of emergency, the reason why he used emergency powers and an emergency declaration is so that he can get federal dollars for a variety of needs throughout Idaho. The problem with that is, I thought he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho. That's what they were telling us. But he's clearly telling us right here that no, we did it as a function to recoup FEMA dollars, which is federal emergency money. And why did he do it? For a variety of needs throughout Idaho. He had a bunch of pet projects, and now he wanted to do this, and he has increased and bolstered the amount of this and the size of government tremendously in Idaho. Then let's go on. He says, without the emergency declaration, we would not be able to provide historic tax relief. A step that's even more important now as gas prices and inflation soar. Well, what do you think caused the inflation? I mean, if we thought this way in our own personal finances, what kind of situation would we be in? We probably wouldn't have homes or vehicles or, much less left over, right? He goes on, without the emergency declaration, Idaho would not be the state with the strongest economy in the nation. So this is a complete insult to the people of Idaho. We understand the insult this is to us. So he's going around touting all over that Idaho has a record budget surplus. That the finances of Idaho are so great, the economy is so great, that he's saying, I'm able to give even a little bit of tax money back to you. But right here, he's telling us how he got that money. It's not because of the economy. It's not because the people generated that through a thriving economy. It's because the federal government, he got $18.7 billion from the federal government. And it's an insult for him to say and then campaign on this. Because clearly he doesn't believe that the people generated this income or this economy. He's just saying we got all this money and so now we're in great shape. He again goes on to say, without the emergency declaration, the state of Idaho would not be able to provide Idahoans with historic tax relief. Again. So, I don't know, many of you may have received this letter. It came along with a check from the state. It was from Brad Little. And I just want to point out a couple things here. It says, my fellow Idahoans, one is, well, he sent this letter right before the Republican primaries. Okay? And he's getting ready to send another one. In fact, he sent it already. I'm starting getting reports that they're getting them right before the general election. Okay? And he says, the economy of Idaho continues to blow past projections, and we are leading the country in economic prosperity. But he just said earlier why, right? Or I just read it to you. He goes on, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for a second year in a row. We are returning your tax dollars with a record budget surplus. Okay? Now, I want to point out, not only is, I just pointed out, like, where the money came from, right? And what he's claiming here, and how it's a false surplus. But I want to point out something here that I think is almost comical if it wasn't so serious. But he says, we achieved historic tax relief for Idahoans for a second year in a row. Now, this letter came out in February of 2022, right before the election, or the primaries. So what 2 years is he talking about? 2020 and 2021. So during the dark months of the pandemic, when the economy was shut down, no one was going to work, everybody was afraid of what's going on. We were kind of in terror. People weren't going to school, and somehow Brad Little and the state of Idaho had the two best financial years they've ever had ever. Right? In fact, it's comical because you go to this article in The Hill, and it says the impact of the pandemic on the U.S. and global economy was catastrophic. Economic historian Adam Tooze characterized its impact as being the swiftest and most comprehensive contraction of global economic activity ever. And yet, that same period, Brad Little says that Idaho had the 2 best financial years they've ever had. And there's a record budget surplus. And because of that, we're going to give you a little bit of money back right before the Republican primaries, and then again right before the general election. It's an insult to the intelligence of the people of Idaho. When you really boil it down and you really look at it, it's an insult to us. And then to top it all off, and some of you may have read a little bit more of this proclamation. I saw some of you pointing at it and so forth. And every once in a while I get someone saying, well, wait a minute, you forgot a really important line in this proclamation. But I'm going to go to it. Because not only did all of this happen, but now Brad Little is saying this. He's saying, I kept Idaho open. Banned vaccine passports. Never issued mandates for vaccines or masks. The emergency declaration never violated or restricted any rights of Idahoans. Never put Idaho on lockdown, and it never allowed for mandates for masks or vaccines. So he must just believe that we will believe whatever he tells us, right? That we're just so unintelligent that we're never going to find these things out, and we're just going to go down and just keep voting for him. But what he's not only saying here that he never violated anybody's rights, but he even says, I never violated or restricted any rights of Idaho. That's what's, unbelievable to me. When we literally had pastors arrested because of his orders in Idaho for peacefully having church services outside. Mothers arrested. Business owners raided, shut down. And yet, and he did it, remember, he did it directing the sheriffs, the chiefs of police, and the Idaho State Police to enforce the order. And yet he has the audacity to come back and say that I kept Idaho open, that I never violated or restricted any rights of Idaho. So it's an insult. It's an insult. Now with that, I've just touched on a teeny bit. I don't know if I wish, because it would get boring, I'd get tired, and we'd all be like wanting to, tear the roof off this place. If I went through some of the things that, we've been able to find and uncover or expose. But I want to spend the rest of our time, or at least most of our time here, I want to answer questions. And I'll probably come down there. And then at the very end, I have some videos I want to show you. We'll just end with that, okay? So it's really quick. There's only a few minutes. But I want to answer your questions. And it could be something personally about me. It could be a policy question. It could be like, I just Googled your name and you sound like an absolute jerk. I do that all the time. I'll Google my name and I'm like, man, I don't like that. So anything you want to ask, I want to be able to answer your question. However, before, you have to write them down, and my campaign manager is going to read them all. And then once she reads them, she'll authorize the ones that I can answer. Just kidding. That's what normal politicians do. I'm not going to do that. So, but right back here. And then right here. Go ahead, yeah. Let's get the mic.
I can do that. A lot of people say that if you eliminate property tax, there won't be enough money go around to pay for like roads and stuff. How would you answer that?
So do you believe that?
No, I don't.
Okay. I just want to. Well, first of all, roads are paid, and the funds for roads are supposed to be paid by the fuel tax. Okay, so that's right off the bat. But property tax does go to things like schools and sheriffs and so forth like that. It also is used for a lot of things that I think are waste. We need to get rid of those. But the concern is if I eliminate property tax, then how are we going to pay for those things? And I'm proposing the elimination of property tax. And the reason why I'm proposing that, why I feel it's so important, is not only do I hate property tax, but it also is a communist idea. It is a communist, it was taken out of the Communist Manifesto. And in fact, the Communist Manifesto, the author of the Communist Manifesto, his name is Karl Marx, and he said that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. And so it's extremely important that we protect private property. And what property tax does is it basically makes the state where they can take our property. And so I'm just going to really quickly go through this. So this is our current property tax system. And let's say, this is pretty accurate, give or take a little bit. Let's say the average home in Idaho is $400,000. So let's take that $400,000 home. And depending on what county you're in, you would pay anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a year on that property, which the total tax collected in a 30-year period would be $60,000 to $90,000. But the problem with our system is you pay until you die and you really never own your home, right? So I'm proposing that we replace it with a consumption tax, okay? That would go something like this. So you take that same $400,000 home, let's say 5% because it's easy math. We put a consumption tax of 5% that's due at the time of sale or purchase. And it can be rolled into the mortgage just like we impact our taxes now. And it ends up being about right around the same. And then remember, we're trying to replace that $60,000 to $90,000 for schools and sheriffs and all of that. So $20,000 is a far cry from that. But you have to calculate in that an average home sells 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. So that would mean that under this system, in that same home, the county and the state would collect $60,000 to $100,000. So it more than pays for the legitimate purposes of government. But what's the difference? Once you pay off the mortgage, you own your home. You don't keep paying tax every year. Just kind of as a side note, did you know that more people during the Great Depression lost their homes to the state because they couldn't pay the property tax than they did to the mortgage companies? That's the threat. People every day in Idaho are losing their homes to the state, and it's usually the elderly because they're retired, they're on a fixed income, their wealth is decreasing because they're reaching the end of their life and they're not earning anymore, and they get to where they're priced out of their homes. Also, the disabled, or if you lose your job for a long period of time. And we should not, protecting private property is so important that we should not allow ourselves or the state to be in the position where they can lien our homes. And I believe that it's very important. So hopefully that clearly answered your question. And that's one of the things that I believe is very important, one of the things that's in my Keep Idaho plan.
I actually had the same question, which is great, because I have another question for you.
Awesome.
First, I met you earlier today, and just want everybody to realize that your 23 line item agendas, I think, are very good, but you're going to need a lot of help to get that done. I asked you if you have an attorney general who can get that done. You said you believe in Labrador, so everybody who believes in the Bundy agenda, please look into Labrador and vote for him to help get the agenda passed, because it's going to be so my question, she asked me a question and you answered it, which is great. 2 quick things. How could you get this done? Could you get it done executive order, or does it have to go through legislature? And also with claiming the federal lands back to the state, we would get those mineral rights, which is a lot of revenue also, that you could reallocate that money for other things, and we could basically be tax-free except for consumption.
Absolutely. Now you're getting the vision of it, right? We're going to talk. So no, this would not just be the power of the governor to do it through executive order. I have declared that I'm going to issue an executive order on day 1 that life begins at conception, and that the state has a duty to protect that life. This is actually not something that the governor can do alone. He's going to have to get the legislature involved, and they're going to have to pass legislation, and that's going to take a lot of support and effort from the people to get this done. with the governor pushing it and, guiding it along. So, great question. Now, one thing that you did talk about is, and you were at a meet and greet that we had earlier today, and I touched on it, and that is the issues that we're facing because the federal government controls so much of our land and resources here in Idaho. I want to show you a map. So the red is federally controlled land in Idaho. The white is private property or state land. It is causing a huge problem in Idaho. And I'll just really quickly go down through the challenges that it's causing. And it's completely unconstitutional. And in fact, if you look here, here's a map of the United States, and there's pretty much the line of the Colorado Rockies. And east of the Colorado Rockies, the federal government only controls 2.4% of the land. And west of the Colorado Rockies, the federal government controls 51% of the land. And it's unconstitutional. It's putting the western states, including Idaho, into a very precarious situation because we're not able to pay our own bills. Contrary to what Governor Little has been saying, Idaho hasn't paid its own bills for the last 38 years. In fact, about a third of our budget comes from the federal government. And just show you here, this is where our funds come from. And if you look in the green there, 36.4%, this is in 2021, of our budget come from the federal government. So Idaho hasn't been able to pay its own bills for 38 years. And a huge part of the reason, the reason, is because the federal government is controlling so much of our land and resources. Just not only can the state not tax these lands, but they also, the people can't generate wealth from these lands, from the land use or the natural resources on it, whether it's lumber, whether it's minerals, whether it's grazing, whatever, they can't generate, so therefore the tax that would generate, the state doesn't benefit from either or get. So they have to go to the federal government and beg for money every year. And as you may know, probably can guess, the federal government doesn't say, well, yeah, but you have to put critical race theory in your schools or Common Core in your schools. You have to follow our curriculum. You have to put the use of force policies in your policing agencies. You have to implement our adopted UN building codes in your counties. And these are the things that are happening all over Idaho because we're taking billions of dollars each year in federal funds and signing these memorandums of understandings. And it's putting what the founders said in undue obedience. Okay, I got you, but hold on for a second because I'm not done with this, and then I'll let you add on to it. So that's just problem number one with federal controlled land, 61%. Problem number two is that we're destroying our number one industry in Idaho because we're landlocked. What's the number one industry in Idaho? It's agriculture, farming. And we're building on our farmland by tens of thousands of acres, and you can never undo that. You can never take a development and turn it back into a farm. And all the white here, the reason why it's white is because that was where we came in and developed all the farm grounds. And we claimed it. And the federal government came later and claimed the rest of it, which was unconstitutional. And so now we're landlocked, so we're destroying our number one industry. So that's problem number two. Problem number three is that the next generation is facing the reality that they're never going to be able to afford a home. And this is our affordable housing crisis. And that's a real thing. I've got a daughter who's 20 years old. They're not quite ready to buy a house, but they will be. And with the wages in Idaho versus the cost of a home, the reality is they're never going to be able to own a home unless they're an exception. And that means they have to leave the state. Well, I don't want them to leave the state. I want them to be close to me. And I'm sure you're the same. And we're literally giving basically condemning the next generation. And it's caused because it's a supply and demand issue. We're landlocked. And also, our natural resources, like our lumber, is being restricted. Up in north in Bonner's Ferry, they're buying lumber, and it's actually all over the United States, but including here in Idaho, they're buying lumber from Canada and paying 3 times the amount for it, while we watch our forests burn up, right? And then the fourth reason is what we're doing is we're driving everybody to the cities. So we're having to build up rather than build out. And when that happens, you get a lot more congestion, smog, pollution. You get all these things because we're building up rather than building out. And there's no reason why a place like Idaho shouldn't be able to build out. And so I'm proposing that we take back these lands, that we around these cities. Around our cities and towns, we began to, annex that into the towns and the cities and spread out. And then we preserve our hunting, hiking, fishing, and camping in what we call multiple use lands, where they're right along with the loggers and the miners and the ranchers, and they're hunting and hiking and fishing and enjoying that together, like we used to do, and not very many years ago. All our hunting roads were mostly made by loggers. And there's no reason why we can't do both and enjoy this land and also benefit from it like we need to. So that's what I'm proposing. Now, did you want to? I got a little bit more to add on this, but do you want to ask a question or you want me to keep going?
Go ahead.
Okay, because I want to show you a couple things. Remember this map right here? So burn it in your mind. You know when you look at the light and then you close your eyes? That's what I want you to do with this one. Because I want to, look at the federally controlled land and where it's being controlled. And then compare it to a map like this, which is the fire history of the United States. Right? Okay? And then compare it, so here is just about a month ago. These are the actual fires in the United States about a month ago. Look at Idaho. The whole entire of Idaho was on fire. Okay? What about the restricted lands in the United States? Let's look at that. Isn't that interesting? Okay, and then if you want to know why they're trying to control so much land in the West, well, I'm going to answer that question real quickly. Because here's a map of the gold and mercury mines in the United States. What about uranium? Here's a map of like the geothermal capabilities or energy that's generated from the earth, from the United States. You see a pattern here? There is a reason why they want to hold on to it, but it's not to preserve it for the next generation. I can promise you that. It's because this is how they're funding themselves. And we have situations like the cobalt mines. Did you know that Idaho has some of the most richest, valuable cobalt in the world, and the largest cobalt deposits in the United States? And let me tell you what's happening. The federal government is claiming that. They're claiming that those minerals, even though they're inside of Idaho, that they belong to the federal government. And they're leasing the mining rights, the mineral rights, to an Australian mining company who is mining it. And they're both getting like billions of dollars each year off of the cobalt that belongs to Idaho, people of Idaho. And the people of Idaho are cut out of it. So what do we have to do? We have to go back to the federal government every year and beg them to pay our own bills. And it's extremely important for the future of Idaho that we solve this problem. Okay, go ahead. And then I got someone right here. Okay, right here and then right here.
I was wondering about the state endowment that's usually for funding schools. I think we could probably fund our schools completely off of the state endowment if we could get more of it from the Fed. And that also goes with grasslands too, not only just trees. But they're selling it all off. They were selling it all off to their friends, I would think. But we shouldn't let them do that. There should be a stop, a halt to that.
Yeah. So let me explain that. State endowments lands, also what they call school lands, and when they broke the state of Idaho up into counties and then up into sections, every 10th section was state endowment land, meaning the state took control of it, and the reason was so that they could pay for schools. But what happened is the state got very lazy, because that's a lot of work to make money off of land, right? they got really lazy and they found out this other idea that if they just tax the property owners directly and call it a property tax, that is a much easier way to pay for our schools. And so the reason why I think this is so applicable in this type of meeting right here is because I want all of you to understand that there was a time when the state did not use property tax to fund their systems and fund their education programs or the sheriffs. There was another way they did it. Now, this endowment land is, most of it's just lying there and nobody's using it anymore. And it's something that we need to get use of again. We need to get using again so that we can, again, generate wealth off of it and also, and then lower the burden that we're putting on the people of Idaho. So that's kind of general. Thank you. Very good. And right here. There's a
It's kind of out there question, but what do you think you're going to do about the Adjutant General of the Idaho Army National Guard, General Garshak? Because I don't believe that he's really served the state of Idaho or the soldiers that we have very fulfilledly. He enforced vaccine mandates, and as far as my knowledge right now, we're about 25 to 30% less efficiency or manpower than when we were 2 years ago.
Yeah. So specifically, I can't tell you exactly what I'm going to do with a specific individual, but the governor is the commander-in-chief of the state guard, and I can tell you that none of this garbage is going on by mandating vaccines inside our state guard is going to, it will not continue. And what are we saying by that? We're actually trying to attract the wrong people or drive out the right people in our military, in my opinion. Those who love freedom, those who are willing to stand up for what is right, we're driving them out of our militaries, and it's on a national level as well. One thing else is I'll say, just kind of, again, just to generally answer your question and kind of give you my position is, the Constitution is very clear that we are not to go to war until Congress declares war. And did you know the last time Congress declared war? Anybody know? I believe World War II, right? So all of these other conflicts or wars that we've been involved in are all unconstitutional. And as Commander-in-Chief of the State Guard, our young men and young women here in Idaho will not go and join the U.S. military in any type of conflict until Congress has declared war. All right. Hopefully that answers your question.
I guess I had a follow-up question as well. If you were elected to the governorship, what do you think you're going to do to help out the soldiers that have already been removed from service?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't thought much about it. Man, if they wanted, I mean, what's wrong with bringing them back in if they wanted that opportunity? Maybe they're past that. I don't know. Maybe they, I do think that it's important that we honor our, financial obligations to them, that we honor our contracts. I believe that's the same with, if you have a hiring contract with a company and they come in and want to change that by trying to push some type of vaccine mandate or something like that, and you're discharged because of that, I think it's very important that we make that wrong right. So, thank you. All right,
I wonder.
Sorry, hang on. I got you, but can you hold on for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll go here because he has the mic, then we'll go here, and then we'll go. Go ahead.
I want to understand that a little bit better. How would you propose to get our land back from the federal government? Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I get that quite often. And I apologize because I went on and on and on, but I never told you how I'm going to propose it. It's pretty easy to point out the problems, but not to offer a solution, right? So if you were to, again, break this map down into counties, you would see that the counties are completely broken down into parcels. Well, let's take one of these parcels that's all red, okay? And if you went down to the county recorder's office, well, who has because it's red. The federal government is claiming that it's their land. Anybody know what the county recorder is going to say? They're going to say there is no title. It's unappropriated land. So it's never been appropriated. It's never been appropriated or titled. It's unappropriated land. And the power of the state and the counties have power to appropriate the land. And we're going to exercise that power. And is it going to cause a legal battle? Absolutely. That's why it's very important that we have an attorney general that's going to fight with me. And I believe in Raul Labrador that he will. And I know he understands. He's a friend of mine. He's been at my house. And we've had a very conversation going on. And I won't be like a little ranching family barely making it against the U.S. government. It'll be the state of Idaho versus the U.S. government. And it's not fair what we've been doing, making these individual families fight this behemoth of a government. And so that's my answer. So we've got 3 more questions. So I'm going to go here, here, and then here, and then I'm going to show you some videos. Okay?
Thank you. We've got a constituent of people here from STAR who've been hanging Bundy things on people's doorknobs. I moved from the most beautiful place on earth, even more beautiful than Idaho, Lake Tahoe, the North Shore of Lake Tahoe. We left in February because of our governor. He shut my church down, he kept the strip clubs open, the liquor stores, and the pot stores. Those were essential business. That's evil. But we had some Christian friends we invited here tonight, and their comment was, Bundy's got a lot of baggage. So I would say, Governor Bundy, the magnitude of what I just heard about Governor Little, whose party I just crashed, because he's right behind my house. I would like to know about it, but not right now. But certainly before you would raise your hand, be sworn in. The real question I have is, because we're new, let's, God forbid, and we're praying for it.
Thank you.
But God forbid you don't get in the governorship this time around. We have a whole bunch of people, we get things in the mail. This is the Republican ticket. Vote for these people. We don't know, and it's hard to determine. Do you have anybody standing up in hallowed Capitol building that speaks evil and that crime of just following the money and taking money from the government and saying it's for the support of the people? Is there anybody that you can give us names, because the election is right around the corner?
Yeah. So thank you. So the answer is yes, but there's a small group of them that are there, not enough to form a quorum in either the House or the Senate, and without the governor they're not able to get any of this stuff done that they need to get done. It's been very, very difficult. Hopefully we can change that, and we will be posting a voter's guide at votebundy.com, and then also Conservatives of. There was a representative here. If you go to conservativesof.com, they have a voter's guide there as well. That I believe is a good, accurate voter's guide. And then just to reference one, or just to mention one time. So this baggage that they say I have, I think when you look into it, you're going to go, man, I'm sure glad he has that baggage. Right? It's because it's all about standing up, actually doing things, protecting people. And yes, I've been arrested, but throw me into a pot of other people that's been arrested for standing for what's right. At least I hope you can do that. So anyway, I offer that. So right here, and then clear back there, and then I'm going to show you a few things.
Thank you. Thank you because you won't play a game and you stand up what is right. As the gentleman from STAR, 2 questions.
Okay.
One was, did anyone in our legislature protest the enactment of martial law and taking the disbursement of finances into the governor's hands and away from the legislature? You would think they would speak up for that, against that. And the other thing was, do you have a list that we could vote for? Because I certainly didn't know a lot of the things I'm learning tonight. And I'd like to know who we can back. I know Raul Labrador is an awesome guy to be part of your team. But I wonder about other people. And then also, what about our court justices? What do we do there? They list all these people. If you haven't been, thank you, dear Lord, haven't been in the courts, you don't know these people and don't know what to vote for. And then the thing I wanted to comment on is, what do we do for the military that have been discharged because they wouldn't take a vaccine? Does it help that today in New York, that New York has to pay back the military, the police and the firemen who were fired because they would not take the vaccine? It's not even a vaccine.
Yeah, so
Speaking from a nurse background, it's a poisonous shot. But in other words, they have to pay them back for the years they were fired.
I agree with
Thank
that.
you.
I kind of explained that I do believe that we have an obligation. There would have been a hiring contract when they were hired, and I believe that the state of Idaho and other municipalities or counties have an obligation to that, absolutely. So now let's get in. What was the first question? I'm going to answer at least that one.
Did any of the legislatures protest?
So did any of the legislature oppose governor? And so the answer is yes, but I will say this. There was a special session that was called by the governor, and the legislatures tried to take advantage, some of the Liberty legislatures tried to take advantage of that, and they began to propose that they end the order because they do have the power to end the emergency order. And they were getting momentum on it, and guess what? Immediately the governor got them together and got them all in a room and talked to them and said, hey, look, if you end the emergency order, we're not going to get all these federal funds. And so they stopped the process. And they allowed it to go on for another, I think, like a year and a half. And so the answer is yes, very small effort, and they weren't very fortified in it. And as soon as they got googly-eyed because of federal money, they just abandoned it. So
I think if they got googly-eyed, they would at least say the legislature needs to disperse the money.
Well, you would think, but they didn't end up doing anything at all. So, all right, right back here. And then I'm going to show you some videos. And I don't know if we could dim the lights when I show that or not. It's not. We don't have to, but if it's easy, that would be great. Go ahead.
So when you become governor, because I'm praying you become governor, one concern I have is a lot of the Idaho state government, and this really pertains mostly power isn't even vested in the legislature or the judiciary. It's actually vested in bureaucratic institutions that have actually been signed in by the legislature or even by so I was wanting to know, as governor, sign an executive order, possibly, I don't know, or work with your fellow constituents in mitigate the risk of
over the executive branch of government in Idaho. A tremendous amount of support from the Republicans, a tremendous amount of unaffiliated voters, the new move-ins, the Constitutional Party and the Libertarian Party, which I will do very well. I just have to reach 310,000 people and I win. And it's very possible, and I want you to know that. With that, I don't know if we can dim the lights or not. If we can, let's go ahead and dim them. And then I got, nope, I'm not, I can't answer any more questions. Okay.
Can I ask you one?
Okay, go ahead.
He was going to try to legalize marijuana. Would you consider doing that? Or
No.
That you just animal. believe needs to happen, because obviously we're doing, because we keep thinking that, oh, if we put more laws and more crime, or more time in jail and all of that, that somehow make drug use, marijuana use less. It's proven to do just the opposite. Okay, so we need to stop. We need to think about what is going to stop the use of drugs and the abuse of marijuana, and truly solve that problem. And one of the things is, I do believe that an enhancement of punishments of when they commit a crime under the influence, right? But I believe that the jurisdiction over a person if they haven't committed a crime. In fact, I know that for certain. So we're violating the Constitution and the principles of freedom by going and trying to prevent all these things rather than punishing the crime after it's committed. And then also, we have to push these issues and support the families. Yes. We have to support the churches. Yes. We have to support the local communities who are truly going to make a difference in this battle. And that's what I believe has to happen. It is a serious problem. We need to work on this problem, but I do not believe what we've been doing since the 70s in this, what we call war on drugs, is going to work, and we need to rethink this. So thank you for that question.
Yeah,
all right.
You didn't answer it all the way.
I didn't answer it all the way.
Well, I mean, would you be like Mr. Phil Little, Governor Little, and he said he's considering doing it? Would you even consider that?
Well, if I just told you, one, the state does not have jurisdiction over your body.
Right.
You believe that? You believe the state has the authority to tell you have to put something in your body? You believe the state has the authority to tell you that you can put something in your body?
No, I'm not.
No, I'm asking you the question.
Okay, if I
has authority to tell you can put something in your body.
No, they're not telling you, but if they legalize it,
I understand. Yes or no? Does the state have authority to tell you you can put something in your body?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, then why do you think the state has authority to tell you can't put something in your body? None of us in our logical mind believe that drugs is a good thing. And we have a problem. It's a huge problem. But I believe we have to go back to the table and we have to solve the problem correctly rather than just keep trying to put more money, more force, more crime, or more incarceration when we know it does not work. We know it does not work. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm answering it straightforward.
I just want to hear the word no, you would not do it.
Well,
think like not all the political stuff back and forth, we're not right. That is your authority.
I do not, as a governor, have authority to tell you what you can or cannot do.
No, that's kind of like this.
Well, I'm telling you, I do not. Does a governor have authority to tell you what you can put in your body or what you can't put in your body? Answer me.
You put it that way, but that's still.
That's exactly how it is. So we have to find the right solutions and the right ways to take care of this problem. And I believe that enhancements, when someone commits a crime under the influence, is one of those ways. Then I also believe that we have to strengthen and put our energy into strengthening the families, strengthening the churches, and strengthening the local community, because that's the reason why we're in this mess in the first place. I really appreciate it. I kind of got into it, and you backed me. I appreciate this. I thought it was valuable. So thank you. I don't in any way disrespect you because of that question you asked me. So now to these videos. Let's have a little fun, lighten it up, and then and because these are the ads that we're running, and if you think that they're valuable enough that they need to go all over Idaho, I'm asking you to contribute to my campaign. I'm asking you to put a yard sign in your front yard. I'm asking you to subscribe to our email so we can send information and you can send it back out. if you think that these messages are worth it. You ready?
Who's California? Is it the drugs? Is it the homeless? Is it the crime? Or is it the defecation in the streets?
Well, luckily for us, we don't live in California. We live in Idaho. Where crime is stopped out, where men are still men, and where the American dream still is today. You see, we do things a little different around here. And we're not going to stand by and watch as our way of life is destroyed. This November, we have one chance to keep Idaho safe from crime, from drugs, and from violence. To keep Idaho free from mandates, from lockdowns, and tyranny. We have a chance to keep our children safe from indoctrination and exploitation. This November, we have one chance to preserve our way of life. I'm Hammond Meridian. Vote for me to keep Idaho, Idaho. This one, and I warned you, this is the PG-13 version, so. But it's an important one, very important.
Something is happening across America. And it isn't isolated to California, New York, or Washington, D.C. It's in our classrooms. It's in our libraries. It's online. It's in our streets. It's in our parks. And it's happening right here in Idaho. Our children are being groomed. Idaho's governor has not only remained silent, he is actively partnering with corporations, lobbying groups, and state agencies who have overseen this perverse assault on our children. My name is Hammond Meridian, and when you elect me governor of Idaho, I will protect our children and use all means necessary to keep them safe from this perverse, sexualized ideology. It's time Idaho puts groomers where they belong. Want to do a couple more? Yeah. They're only a minute long, so. There's a war being waged against the most vulnerable and helpless people in our society, the unborn. With over 75 million abortions in the U.S. alone, abortion has become the largest genocide in human history. But with the overturn of Roe versus Wade, states have been given an opportunity to fight for the lives of the unborn. Brad Little sided with Democrats and voices, but he refused to fight when he called Idaho's laws on abortion unconstitutional and unwise.
I want to be clear. Murdering children is not a choice. It is a crime. And when I am governor, this crime will no longer go unpunished.
My name is Hammond Meridian. I will put an end to abortion on day one. A vote for me is a vote to ensure that Idaho's borders are where abortion ends and where life begins.
So this one's a little bit of Hollywood. Just beware, it's a little bit of a Hollywood one. And then I got one more to show you after this.
All right. If there's anyone out there, if you can hear me, this is a warning.
There's a new threat in this great land, and it's come to Idaho. It can take on many forms and names, but we know that with Peter's hate, they work to destroy our sacred values, beliefs, and what is most precious to us. There's only one way to fight this evil. Find them and chase them out. For now, they failed. They're still lurking in the darkness. And this battle has just begun.
All right. So this is the last one, and then after this is over, you finish up here. I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your questions, and I really appreciate your willingness to be here. It says a lot about you. So last but not least.
Idaho liberals say that if I'm elected as governor, they will leave the state. Well, I'm here to tell you that when I'm elected governor, Idaho will help pay for their moving costs. Idaho spends nearly 40% of our annual budget on welfare programs. That's almost $4 billion of your tax dollars thrown up in the smoke every year. As governor, we will be getting rid of property tax, income tax, and your grocery tax, and balancing the budget by ending our $1 billion welfare state. Idaho is California, and the liberals have a problem with that, and we're helping move. After all, moving costs will be only a fraction of the price of income here. No one is saying you have to leave. You have to stay here, and have to work like the rest of us.